Welcome. This is Diamond in the Rough. I'm your host, Karen Walker. I have a special guest with me today, director and producer Shaquayla Mims. Thank you so much
Hi,
for joining me, my dear. Thank you so much
thank
for
you for
joining me.
having me. Crazy.
Well, I'd like to begin our discussion with a quote and would love your insight.
Ooh, I'm all ears.
Here, yeah, here we go. Storytelling is how we survive. When there's no feed, the story feeds something. It feeds the spirit, the imagination. I can't imagine life without stories. Stories from my parents, my culture, stories other people's parents, their culture. That's how we learn from each other. It's the best way. That's why literature is so important. It connects us heart to heart. And that's a quote from Alice Walker. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I love that so much, and I have I don't know. I guess I can pan over and show you guys, but I have a wall of some of the Black authors that inspire me, and just some paintings. And Alice is definitely one of those writers who inspires me. But I think her quote is so true because without storytelling, we wouldn't be able to understand how far we've come, where we've come from, as well as, where we need to go in the future and how we need to react and respond to things in the present. And so I'm one of those people who believes that God gives us all gifts that we have to share with the world, to really just bring some light and positivity into the world. And so I am most grateful that he picked me to be one of our storytellers because my focus, and we'll get into this a lot later, but my focus as a writer, director, producer, I feel, is to tell the stories of the unseen and tell the stories of people who feel like they're not, understood, or people don't get to see them, and that really is a gift to be able to do that and give back to humanity in that way.
Well, now tell me more about how you became interested in, and in addition to that, how you cultivated your skill sets as a producer and director.
Whew, well, I got into film, or realized that this is my path. I guess about 4 years ago now, going on 4 years. I was going through a breakup at the time, and I found myself having all this free time, and so I was wondering what to do with that. And so, of course, I was watching a lot of Netflix, Hulu, all of those streaming services and things. And Insecure had come out right around that time. And I remember seeing Issa Rae on HBO, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the same girl that I used to watch in college, who was making YouTube videos, and was one of the first people to kind of do a web series online. And so I just started researching and looking into how that became a thing, and I realized that being a TV writer, or being a writer for movies and TV, was a thing. And that was something that I had never even considered before. But the crazy thing was, is my whole life I've been a writer. When I was in school, from elementary on to college, I would always get compliments and just awesome feedback on how powerful and impactful my writing was. But I never realized that that was a talent, and I definitely didn't realize that something you can make money off of outside of writing a book, which was something I generally had no interest in doing. And so, long story short, I I decided I was going to write a web series and be the next Issa Rae, and so I wrote this whole web series called Stall Stories, and I hired a cinematographer and a sound person, like basically a crew, to help me shoot this web series. And I'm sitting in a meeting with the cinematographer. He's asking me all these questions, and I realize I know nothing about what he's talking about, because film has its own language. It has its own it just has its own language, like any job, any job sector that you work in. And so I called everything off because I realized I didn't know what I was doing. And so someone I started going to meetups to meet other people and figure out, how can I learn more about this. And in a screenwriters meetup, someone told me that you could take classes at a local television station, a public access station, Fairfax Public Access, and in Virginia. I was living in D.C. at the time, and they let me know that you could take classes there on different aspects of filmmaking, really, but also just production in general. And so I just started taking classes, and I had a full time job. I worked in the nonprofit sector for many years as a communications manager. And I just took classes on nights and weekends, and I learned video editing. I learned field production. I learned how to operate a studio camera within a production studio, and I just going from a breakup and feeling all that kind of just lost. I wasn't really happy or fulfilled in my job at the time. I was really wondering, like, where, how am I going, like, what's it for me? There has to be something else outside of just going to this 9 to 5 today. And so even before I started writing, I had this moment with God, and I was like, if I could do anything in the world, what would it really be? And I feel very clearly He told me to write a TV series about a certain thing, and I've been working on that for the past few years. And so that experience with God, coupled with the classes that I was taking and everything that I was learning, it really opened up a new world for me, and I felt myself really come alive, and it felt right. And so I just have continued following that feeling ever since.
Well, now I'm glad you mentioned your education. I want to speak more to, if you could speak more to a mentoring relationship,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and how that experience was for you.
So the crazy thing is, so I mentioned that I worked in the nonprofit for 7 years. And so part of my job, we would host these conferences for college students to find jobs after college. And so basically, we will host events where these executives in retail, because this job was retail specific, and they were talking about the store jobs we see and jobs beyond that in their corporate facilities. So technology, we're talking about technology jobs, supply chain jobs, all of that. But as we would host these conferences, we would get feedback after each one. And so the number one thing that the executives, these high level executives, multi-million dollar executives, the main thing that they love to talk about was mentorship. The main thing that our students love to hear about was mentorship. And so through that, I realized how important that is through career growth. And so for myself, um, wouldn't say I necessarily went to go seeking for these mentors, but I feel like God definitely connected those mentors with me. And so my mom, realizing that I wanted to be in this area in filmmaking, she connected me with a friend of hers who is a writer and had done this reality TV show or this reality web series, helping lower income students find these amazing prom dresses and having a great prom experience. She connected me with her. I call her Miss Tabitha, Miss Tab, or my auntie now because our relationship has grown so much. And so she really became my first mentor because we would be on the phone and she'd be like, "This is what you need to do," da, 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 like, and she would just start sharing all these things that she learned, and I would take notes. And then it occurred to me that she was a mentor to me. And so that's my first mentor. My other mentor, and she helps me with all things from my video editing to production to the business side of things. And then when I moved here to Atlanta, I got plugged into a writer's room that this guy named Sean Mathis hosts the writer's room every Thursday night. And I just started going, and it was really challenging at first when I met him. He told me my story was trash and that But he was like, you could do better than this. And I was offended at first, but I realized he was right. I did have a better story to tell inside of me. And so taking feedback week after week, and he has become a mentor to me as well, in the sense of, he's taught me a lot about also the business side of filmmaking here in Atlanta specifically. But he also opened me up to what's called independent filmmaking, which is where you can create these TV shows, web series, films, short films, or features outside of, major production studios, and how to make those things work when you have a small budget, and how to secure financing, different things like that, how to write better stories. And so, in listening to him, like and I just started going to them, if I have questions, or if there's something that I don't understand, or if I'm not sure about how to approach a situation, I'll just call them up and ask them questions. And thankfully, they still pick up the phone, and they give me really great answers and advice. So I've been really lucky in that way. I would say mentorship is definitely about relationship building. These relationships started from me learning from them, and in return, I've been able to realize there are things that I can teach them as well, so that it's a I wouldn't say it's a mutual mentorship, but it's more so a symbiotic relationship, in that we can pour into each other.
Yeah, most times those relationships are pretty natural.
Yes.
Acquaintances that you may know, and a lot of young people really don't understand that it's not really necessary to seek a mentor. Most times you can find them right at home.
Yeah, that's very true. And another thing too, like, I feel like I hear some younger people, they feel like, well, I'm gonna ask this person to be my mentor. That's not really kind of the best way that it works. It's really something that's born out of a relationship. I would say, if you have questions about something, or if you find that a person is teaching you new things and willing to answer your questions, then that's a good foundation to build a mentorship off of that. Because a mentorship really is, it's almost like like a teacher, you know what I mean? And I think that you have to have different mentors for different things, and you have to have different mentors for different stages and areas of your life as you grow too. And so I would just say, if someone is willing to teach you new things and answer questions that you have, and be honest and give you honest feedback, like, I sent the first short film that I ever made to Miss Tab, and she was like, this is a good start. She was like, but don't ever show this to anybody. She was like, unless you tell them this was student work, like, don't ever show this to anybody.
Right.
And I
Right.
wanted to be offended, but she's like, I'm telling you this because there are mistakes. There are some mistakes, some very obvious mistakes that you made, that you can learn from, to help implement in your next film. And so she's like, that's the only reason I'm telling you this. And she's like, you can take it or leave it. You could be offended and never talk to me again. But if you want to get better, then here's how I suggest that you get better. And more than pride or ego, I want to be a better film. I'm always striving to be a better filmmaker, so that I can be one of the best, and have leave a legacy behind. And open the door for other filmmakers, alike and different from myself. And so that was feedback that I had to take. And I'm glad that she was honest with me, because had she not been, I would have been showing this project to people thinking that, I'm this awesome film director, or this filmmaker, because I made this one project, and the project is really not good. And now that I've directed 6 projects this year, 2 of which have been my own that I wrote. And looking back at that film, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I never showed anybody.
That just goes to show you that constructive criticism is such a blessing. And if you're
It
not
is.
receptive to it, yeah, if you're not receptive to it, how can you grow professionally?
you won't grow professionally. I go to this writers room that I mentioned every Thursday, and there are some newer writers who come in there, and sometimes their stories do get torn apart, and it's not because it's because they can write a better story. Like using myself as an example, when I went to the writers' room, when I first started going to the writers' room, I wrote a story about a girl going through a breakup and how she found God and and all this, and it was basically my story. I needed to write it to get it out, I guess. But my instructor, who later became my mentor, he was like, "Nah." He's from Philly. He was like, "Nah, B." He was like, "This ain't it." He was like, "Nobody in Hollywood is gonna take you serious. Like you're already a female writer. Like there are a ton more things you can write about other than a woman trying to get a man and get married and be happy." And I was offended at first because I was still healing. But I realized that he was right, and so this story that went from a half-hour comedy about a girl going through a breakup, which was literally what it was about, which would have been boring. That was the other thing. He was like, "We have an imagination for a reason. Use it." Has evolved.
Depiction of someone else's story.
Right, right. And you know what? It's so lame too because I look back at some earlier drafts and my name is Shaquayla, and the girl's name in the story was Shay. I'm like, how much, like, why, why was I thinking this was the shit? But so this story evolved from a half-hour comedy about a girl me going through a breakup to a 1 hour drama, multi-layered drama about a woman, a sex worker, trying to save her daughter from being sex trafficked while also fighting her addiction. And so, that's a much more compelling TV show to watch than somebody crying on the couch every week.
But some people may need to watch it.
Yeah, that's true.
Some,
That's true. And I do feel like there's some ways I can incorporate some of those elements of that first kind of iteration of the show into later projects. But basically, what he was saying was, he was like, "You have a better story to tell." He was like, "Go deeper." And so he really challenged me, and I took that challenge because I'm not going to back down. And he was right. I had a much bigger, much better story to tell. But I see other
speaking
writers
about
and they
story,
don't take their feedback and they just never come back to the writers room, and they're like, forget this place. They don't tell me my story is trash. And then, they're never able to reach their goals and things like that.
yeah. Let's talk more about production. There's an ever increasing development of our work as media professionals.
Yeah.
Why do you think this is necessary?
It's so necessary because we're a part of this country's fabric. You know what I mean? The things that we see on TV, on in movies, and on our streaming devices now, those images and those stories and those portrayals that people see shape how we see people in real life, how we feel about people in real life, what we think about people in real life. And so it is important for all creators to have a seat at the table, whether you're black, queer, and fall into the LGBTQ, whether you are Latinx or, Asian. And, it is important for all of our voices to be heard because that's the world that we live in. And so, there's a huge challenge within the industry. There is this big push for minority content creators, minority writers, directors. There's a huge push for it, but at the same time, Hollywood is saying, we want new voices, we want more black creators, more Latinx creators, more Asian creators. Da, 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 da. They're also telling us, well, I don't think this character works as an engineer, as an architect. I think he'd probably be better served, kind of being a street hustler. And so it's like at the same time you're telling us that we need your voices, we want to hear these different stories, which if you think about it, audiences want to see this too. You look at shows like This Is Us that has a multiracial cast. It has all this diversity within the cast. Movies that have more diversity in them. Those films and TV shows do better, and they're able to draw in larger audiences because everyone is able to see a part of themselves within that film. Or you look at successes like Parasite, which is done by a entire Asian cast, a Korean director. Uh, that film does so well because it's a story that we haven't seen before. That's what people want to see. We want to see stories that we haven't already seen. No one wants to see. Um, no one wants to see, like I said, the same old breakups. Breakups. Girl tries to find a man. Da, 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 da. Yeah, you want to see those sometimes, but what really draws you in are, the Parasite stories. This Is Us TV shows where you can relate, where this black guy has a predominantly white family, but his black wife, also has her head wrap on, and he's like, my wife bathes in cocoa butter and wears a head wrap. It's like, yes, I can see myself in that character, and then also feel for these other characters that you're showing us. And so, I think it's important to have different creators and different voices at the table because it's what audiences want to see, and it's the world that we live in. Media's job is to inform and entertain, and all of these old ways of doing things, and all of these older kind of stories or playing into these stereotypes, um, it's not going to work anymore. You know what I mean? Like Denzel Washington won an Oscar of all the films. He won an Oscar for playing, a dirty cop. But now we have the Mahershala Ali's who can play in Moonlight and all of these different stories, and allowing us to see black men as vulnerable, and seeing different sides of them versus boxing them into these stereotypes. And that film's done really well. So I think the audiences need it and deserve it.
Why do you think that the work is so intense for us culturally? And if you could just speak from a director's point of
You
view.
said intense or intense?
Intense.
The work.
Why is the work so intense?
Why is the work so intense? I think because on some level we still have to prove ourselves. Especially being a. Oh wow! So I got into it not got into it in a sense of like got into it, but so on Twitter I connected with this other group of women. One woman is a Hispanic writer director who lives in Dallas, a producer. Another woman is a black producer, director, writer who lives in Philly. Another woman in our group is an Asian woman who is an actress, writer, and producer. She lives in Chicago. I'm here in Atlanta. And we all connected on Twitter over like the most random joke. And, we just really loved each other's energy. All that to say, that has evolved into us having these Zoom calls, like a Saturday every other month, where we just all get up and catch up and talk about what's going on in the industry, what we've learned. We share insights, all of that. And all of us have something in common, being that we're all women trying to push forward in this industry. And so I know the question is about intensity as a director, but I'm going to speak to the female director's experience. And so what's happened is we realized in our last call back in October is that you have all these men in the industry across the racial spectrum who are like, I love female filmmakers. We want to help female filmmakers. We're all about female filmmakers. But then what happens is they don't recommend us for jobs. They don't share jobs specifically with us. They don't share our content. They don't, put us in the rooms with these other people that they have connections to who may need or be looking for what we have to offer. And so one of the examples that she gave was that one of those young women gave was she had posted about how she was looking for a studio or production company that could help her bring her features to life. And so this one guy, who loves to claim that he's all about female filmmakers, he just liked it on Twitter. Whereas another woman in our group, the Asian woman in Chicago, she actually sent her a message and said, "Hey, this company in Chicago, I know they're in Chicago and not in Dallas, but they may be a good fit for you." Da 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 da. Well, the filmmaker in Dallas reached out to the company in Chicago, had a talk with the CEO, and now they're going to help her produce her feature film. That is the type of help that we are seeking, or the type of allyship that we are seeking when we say, when you talk about intensity and, fighting to kind of, get your stories out there and get everything you need to bring that storytelling to life in a real, authentic way. One is this kind of what we dubbed as performative mentorship, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll like and share your posts on Instagram or Twitter, but I'm not going to actually follow through and actually send you a contact that can actually help you. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's so intense is that, Hollywood just discovered last year or earlier this year that they are, well, they discovered 2 years ago that they have a sexism problem with the whole Me Too movement or whenever that started. And this year they discovered that they also have a racism problem through movements like Black Lives Matter and different things like that. And so, it's intense because Hollywood has been operating a certain way for so long, and it's been working for them in the sense that they're able to make money and push out the type of content that they think their audiences want to see. And to them, the audience is the white audience, the predominantly white audiences. And they've been catering and subscribing to that mindset for a really, really long time. But as we can see, the world, our country is changing, and we're speaking up and we're speaking louder about what we want to see and what we want to do, and making it known what we're capable of with or without going through the standard conventions of Hollywood. And so I think Hollywood is in a place now where they're either going to have to adjust or get out of the way. And that's pretty intense as a filmmaker, because you're trying to navigate the norms of how Hollywood used to do things, but also you still have to pay attention and adapt and be able to incorporate and use how independent filmmakers are changing things, how audiences are changing things, how the views and thoughts and opinions of audiences are changing. And so we're juggling all these things at once while also trying to tell authentic stories and tell stories that matter to us, that we believe to be important, that we want to get out there. And so it is intense. I'm not gonna lie, it's intense, but it's also kind of what makes it fun too. And having worked in another industry, every industry has its own battles that you have to face. It has its own intensities in a certain way. So, but I mean, it's great that Hollywood is changing, and they're either going to change or, they're either going to change or be changed. So they're either going to change of their own or be changed by audiences and filmmakers. And so it's a great time to be in Hollywood. It's an exciting time because there's no one way to make it anymore.
Well, if they don't know already, they better watch out for Miss Shaquayla Mims.
Okay, well,
You have a lengthy
yes,
resume. You have a lengthy resume. You have been studying and working hard for a long time. Okay.
I've been
And
trying
I
to. Thank
applaud
you for
you
that.
for all of the work that you have done, my sister. I
Thank
admire you
you.
for all that you've done. I'm so proud of you, and it's such a blessing to know you. We've been acquainted for a little over a year and almost 2 years now, right?
Yep, yep, two
And
years,
yeah,
yep.
and so wow, I'm grateful. You've worked on a number of notable projects in the past. Speaking of your lengthy resume, talk about talk about your the projects and why you selected those specific projects.
So I sent over this short film that I wrote and directed earlier this year called "It Takes a Village." And this particular film, so how it came to be, I had gone to the park. I live in Atlanta and I live near Piedmont Park, which is really awesome. And so a lot of times I still had my 9 to 5 job. And so what I would do is when I would log off, because I was working remote. So even before COVID, I was already working from home during that whole virtual thing. But when I would log off work, I would go to the park and I would sit and write, read, do yoga, whatever. And this particular day, I had gone to write a episode for this comedy series. Well, while I'm sitting in the park, I get a text message from a friend of mine, and she lets me know that she had miscarried her child through her pregnancy, that her pregnancy had resulted in a miscarriage. And so, as devastated as she was, as her friend, I was also kind of devastated because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to comfort her. I didn't know how to, make it better. I'm a proud Sagittarius. And, we pride ourselves on being able to make our friends laugh and, just tell the blunt truth and um, to pick our friends up and make our friends feel better. And I just had no idea what to say. And so I just started Googling all these things about miscarriages and, what to say to a friend during this time. And I learned that it's a more common occurrence among women than what I previously thought it was. I even ended up talking to my mom about it, and she shared that she had a pregnancy that resulted in a miscarriage too, which I had never known. And so I'm sitting in the park, and mind you, I went there to write this comedy. Well, after a text message like that, I mean, there's just like no way I could write a comedy. And so I wrote a 2-page short film about, a family that kind of goes through this once I realized that it's more common than what I realized. And the film doesn't have any dialogue because what do you say during, there's no right thing to say during that. And so I just wrote it right then and there. And I tweaked it a little bit once we got into production. And so it's so interesting. So another crazy story. So as far as the production part of it, and this is how I know it was God, because I had signed on to help another filmmaker friend of mine produce a short. She was home. She lives in California. She goes to USC Screenwriting School, which has this awesome program that she's a part of. She had come home to Atlanta and she wanted to shoot a short film. Well, I was like, great, you're back. Like, let's get this done. I signed on to be a producer. But her script called for these really complex locations. Like, we needed an ER and a morgue. We actually went to go see a morgue and saw like this random dead body on a Wednesday afternoon, like on location scouting, which was so crazy. We're like literally talking business with this guy, and there's this like somebody who's passed away like right beside us. So she realized that it wasn't going to be feasible to shoot her production, and so she was like, you know what, you have it. It takes a village. It's only 2 pages. We can knock this out in a day. I already have the crew nailed down. Let's see if they'll just be willing to change projects. And so we changed projects, and the crew was with it. They were like, yeah, sure, I already have this weekend booked off. Let's get it done. And so that was my the first short film that I directed. And it literally every project that has come to me this year, it wasn't something that I sought out. It wasn't something that I applied for. All the stuff I actually got applied for, I got rejected from. It was actually just God sending people my way. And it worked out, and I directed it and I edited it, and had this awesome guy here in Atlanta, Michael D. Hall, at the color grading and had another guy who I randomly met in a lift one night coming home from set, and he talked about how he does music and he wants to do more film scoring. He scored the film for me, and it just all really came together. And I intentionally released it this past October, which is National Infant Loss and Miscarriage Remembrance Month, or Awareness Month, excuse me. And yeah, this is that project. It takes a village.
Congratulations. We're going to take a look at
Thank
that clip
you.
later on in the interview. I want to
Awesome.
yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that as well and some of your other collaborative works. Are there any other projects that you've been involved with in the past? Any film projects that you've worked in the past? I'm sure there are. Again, you have a lengthy resume.
Well, it's so crazy. I worked on this movie production last year as a production assistant. It was really just a kind of a day player thing called Hillbilly Elegies, which I believe is dropping on Netflix like this weekend, or
Okay.
coming up this month. And then I just wrapped on this production it was another production assistant role, which was great because it was paid all enough money, still got paying my bills. And that film is called Cop Shop and will star Gerard Butler, Frank Grillo, and Alexis Louder. But most of my those projects were great. It's great working on the bigger movie productions. But the projects that I'm most proud of are the ones that I've worked on independently. I just wrapped between September and October. I shot two short films, one called House Girl that a friend of mine wrote, and she asked me to direct and trusted me with bringing that vision to life. And the other film was called Fine that I wrote last year. Was able to shoot that and directed that. I just got the color grading back for that today, and it looks really, really awesome. So I can't wait to wrap that project up. And both of those short films are slated for the 2021 festival run. So we'll see how those things go. I can't attach myself to the outcome, only to the effort put in. So we'll see how that goes. But otherwise, I've just been connecting with people on social media earlier this year, like literally right before COVID started. This one of my Instagram followers, we were having a chat about another movie that had come out, The Photograph, starring Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield. And she was like, "Oh, I see that you're a director. Would you be interested in directing my web series pilot?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure. Like send it over." And it's really funny. And I was like, "Yeah, I would love to do this." And so, literally the weekend that we started filming was when Atlanta shut down because of COVID. And it was so funny because we were like, "Oh, this will just be like the bird flu thing or the Zika virus. Like, it's not going to be a major thing at all." Like, and I was like, "Well, I could just go to the grocery store to get toilet paper, but there wasn't any. They had like a few rolls left, and I'll go back after we finish filming this weekend to get some more. Of course, by the time I go back to the store, everything was gone." And now knowing what we know, it was not a little thing that just kind of went away. So we actually had to take some time off shooting that production because Atlanta like really really shut down. Um, and we couldn't go anywhere. We had a stay at home order. And then so we started filming that in March, and then we took a break and we came back in June for one more day of filming and wrapped that project. And then about 2 weeks ago, she asked if I would come back to direct episode two. And I did that and got to work with these amazing actors, Christopher Johnson and Coco Brown, who has been on a few Tyler Perry shows. She's been on Single Moms Club. She stars as Carla on Fox's 911 show. And so I don't know how, but I'm finding myself in these rooms with these, kind of movers and shakers, and it's a really great thing. It's a really great feeling. So, yeah, that's pretty much a few of the things I've been working on this year.
Well, movers and shakers can only fill a room with other movers and shakers.
True,
That's
true,
for
true.
sure. Yeah, I actually follow Coco Brown on Instagram, and she's very, very
Yes.
funny. I love her humor. So, congratulations
Thank
to that.
you.
Um, wow, that's fantastic. Um, I don't know if I had asked you this question previously, but I wanted to know if there were any personal experiences that drove your projects or helped shape your direction in film.
Hmm. Well, I would say
Some
the
may be more
breakup was
personal than
definitely.
others, and that's all right.
Well, I would say the breakup was definitely one. Because during this point, I had kind of, or throughout that relationship, I guess I had kind of resolved myself to, I guess, kind of doing the standard American thing where you just work a 9 to 5, you get married, and you have some kids, you just live life, and you put your life on the back burner until your kids go to college, and then you regain. So I kind of resolved myself to that. Well, when that relationship ended, I'm actually super grateful for that experience because when that relationship ended, I felt like I had a new opportunity to kind of rethink my life. And I was able to, instead of having to make decisions based on this relationship or based on this other person, I was really able to kind of rethink my life and rethink what it is that I wanted to do, what it is that I how I love to spend my time, what where I wanted to live, and I was able to really be honest with myself and think about what I wanted my life to look like, and that really served me because it helped me to see that I didn't need to stay in this 9 to 5 to, kind of be in this relationship and kind of support myself or feel like, we were a two income couple or whatever. And so that is what initially got me into filmmaking and writing, screenwriting. And then throughout the course of this journey, once I realized, so I was still living in DC. About a year and a half later, after I started this screenwriting journey, and all of my friends and the people who were around me at the time in DC, they were like, you just look really happy. You look really happy, and I can tell that they were telling me that they could tell that this kind of new journey I was on was the right journey and the right path. And I had decided I was going to move, and I really was resolved to move to LA because I was like, well, that's where all the writers are. And but one of my friends, who I met through work, we had become really, really good friends. She sent me a Time article, and it talked about how Atlanta was the new Hollywood of the South. And I had been to Atlanta before, but I hadn't been to Atlanta in a few years, and so I didn't realize that Atlanta really had become this like hub of production. Uh, Pinewood Studios, which is here, uh, has the largest production, or the highest quantity of productions actually happens here in Atlanta, and I didn't realize that. And so I had to make a decision. My lease was coming up in DC, and my landlord, she wanted to move her parents from Africa. She wanted to move them into DC, and so it's kind of like the perfect storm of like all these things that were happening, but they were good in a way. And so I found myself faced with this decision of, do I move and leave the comfort of this place that I've lived in DC, this job that I've had for all these years? Do I just move and start somewhere new? Because I didn't have a job lined up, I didn't have a place lined up. I had friends from college who lived here in Atlanta, but they're all starting their families. They're on a different life path than what I am right now. And so I really had to make this decision. Do I stay here and keep doing what I've always done? Or do I move and really take a chance on myself and try something new? And I decided to move, but I decided to move to Atlanta, obviously, instead of LA. And I figured, I would move to Atlanta, continue to learn, continue to build up, my name and my reputation, and build my craft and hone my craft. And so I decided to move here, and I ended up going home to Charlotte, North Carolina for a month because, like I said, I didn't have a job lined up, I didn't have a place lined up. And when I told my boss that I was moving, because it was like literally, it was like August 5th, I think, and I told her that I was going to be moving September 1st because my lease was going to be up. And I was literally crying because I had decided that I wanted to move, but I hadn't committed to it yet. And she said to me, she was like, don't cry. She was like, we all have these decisions to make, at some point in our lives. And she was like, just stand in it. And she was like, don't, just don't, hopefully it won't be something you regret. And thank God it hasn't been something that I regretted. But luckily, I was able to keep my job because they were in the busiest season, and so finding someone to replace me took a year. And so I was able to keep my job and just work remote. And so I moved, and so a month later, I went to home for a month. Excuse me, I went to home to Charlotte, North Carolina, stayed there for a month, and then in October of 2018, moved here to Atlanta. I still had my job in DC, so I was working from home. And the first month that I lived here, I had a mental breakdown because I had left my job. I left all my friends. I had this huge social life, and it's not like you leave a place on a. It wasn't like leaving a place on a bad term. Like I left to take a chance, to take a risk, to start a new life, and that transition was really really hard. I mean, there was a week while I was in the house and I just cried straight because I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the area. I didn't know anyone, and I was wondering if I'd made the right decision because it wasn't like I just moved here. Oh, all these film jobs are just coming out of the work. It was like, no, it wasn't like that. I had to get plugged in, and so I started going to the writers' room. And from there, just kind of my world just kind of opened up, opened up, opened up, and I learned that I still needed to hone my craft. I had the talent of writing, but screenwriting is very technical. There's a lot of different things that go into building, the types of stories that we see on TV, and I had to learn a lot of those things. So that experience was also really humbling in the sense of, I had this idea, I'm just going to go to Atlanta and be popping, but I had to come to Atlanta and learn and meet people and develop mentors and develop my relationships with my mentors.
So now what additional advice can you give to aspiring artists?
Additional advice I would give to artists is, feedback prevents failure. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. As a writer, I used to be so scared to share my writing with people, to share my projects with people. And it wasn't until I got into the habit of sharing my scripts, sharing my projects with people, and hearing feedback. Now, granted, this has a caveat because not all some feedback, you just got to take with a grain of salt. If you really sit and think about it, and it doesn't, like for example, someone told me for my script about the girl going through a breakup, they were like, well, she should just be a blogger and do this and da da da. That didn't really work for the story, and it's not because I was holding on to that story. It just didn't work for the story because we've kind of seen that already. And so some feedback, it's just like, okay, thank you for your feedback, you chuck it. But some feedback is actually constructive, and you have to listen to it with I guess, your brain and not your heart. Because if you listen to it with your heart, that's when you have all these hurt feelings and you build up these resentments and all of that. But if you listen to it with your brain, you can better discern, is this going to help me in my craft? Is this going to help me realize my goals, or is this going to hinder me? So that, I think, will be my first piece of feedback, is that, or my first piece of advice is that feedback prevents failure. And like this pilot that I wrote, I got 4 rounds of feedback. I've done 4 rewrites. Well, I am a perfectionist, low key. When I first started this journey, I thought that you just write a script one time, you make it as good as you can the first time, and that you don't have to go back and keep writing all this stuff. Well, I came to learn that writing is rewriting, which means that here I am 3 years later, still working on this same pilot because when you're building a masterpiece, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a month. It may not even happen in a year. It could, but it probably won't. You got to chip at it. You got to chip at it, and you gotta, you just gotta keep working on it and keep tweaking it and honing it. And like they say, greatness takes time. And so that was my other piece of advice is that greatness takes time, and that's okay. The people that you think are overnight successes, it more or less took them 10 years to get there. Like, if you notice, you'll see someone like a Mahershala Ali who's won an Oscar, all this great stuff. But then you go back and you could be watching like an older show and you'll be like, wait, that's Mahershala Ali. It's like, yeah, you didn't realize how big he was in this show that came on 10 years ago, but now that he's won an Oscar, it seems like he just came out of nowhere, and that's not the case at all. So we see that all the time. So being an overnight success takes about 10 years, I would say. And then my last piece of advice is I'm going to tell you a story. So there was this girl who I met here in Atlanta, and it seemed like every single time I went on her Instagram, she was doing everything that I wanted to do. She was working on the major movie productions. She was writing all the time. She was finishing scripts and, directing and all this other stuff. And I was so jealous. I was like, dang it, this girl is doing everything that I wanted to do. Well, I had to check myself and I had to realize I can't be jealous of her because she's getting her hustle on. I need to figure out, instead of being jealous of her, I need to figure out what I need to do to get to that level. And what I realized I needed to do was I needed to hone my craft. All of these books behind me are all of these screenwriting books and different books that I've bought since I moved here to Atlanta that helped me with helped me with directing, helped me with writing, other stories, Shonda Rhimes, Issa Rae, an editing book up there, a business book. I had to hone my craft, and it's you have the talent, but you still just because you have the talent, it's not enough. You have to learn, and that was something that was very humbling for me because I thought I knew everything, and I didn't. And taking the time to learn and to hone my craft what has led me to directing these 6 projects, writing 2 of those 6 projects myself, and being a producer on all of those projects because I took the time to learn. And really, in this industry, you're always learning. You're always learning.
Speaking of honing your skill sets and you being the professional that you are, I want to take a look at a clip of It Takes a
Okay.
Village. And then we'll come back and we'll talk briefly and about gatekeepers and film family.
Okay.
And then we'll close out the
All right.
show.
Sounds good.
Wow. Such a compelling story. Wow, I got goosebumps. Woo!
Yeah, yes. I wrote this a year ago, shot it in January, and spent a lot of the pandemic just editing it, sitting on it, editing it, sitting on it, and then finally released it in October. And on specifically released it on National Infant and Miscarriage Loss Remembrance Day to honor the women and families who have gone through that.
Well, you're a talented young lady, and you have a very graceful way of relating the message through film. I want to thank you for joining me today. Um, it was such a pleasure to talk to you, always. In
Okay.
closing, I have an additional quote that I want to present to you. We are the ones we have been waiting for.
Mm. I would agree with that. I think that's one of the reasons too why I just love independent filmmaking so much is there's a layer of rawness to it and realness to it. Like with it just we just all want to serve the story, and that's really kind of what's at the heart of my production company, Gatebreaker Productions, and Film Family, this organization I co-founded with other filmmakers and creatives. We just wanted to bring people together in film and let the independent filmmakers and that community know that we are the ones that we've been waiting for, because all we need is each other, to help each other rise and to help each other um, go far. And so there's nothing that community can't do. Community changes the world.
Well, again, I enjoyed you today and
I enjoyed you
always.
too.
We're going to need a part two. We're going to need a part two because we talked very little about gate breakers and film family. So
That's
we're going to need
okay.
to do
We
this
talked
again.
about what we needed to talk about today.
Okay.
I
Okay.
appreciate
I
that.
respect that. I respect that.
Yeah.
I love you.
Yes. I love you
Love you
too, and
so
thank
much.
you, thank you, thank you. I just want to say
Thank you.
I am so proud of you, and you had this vision for this platform 2 years ago when we met at ABFF, and so watching you really, pour into your vision and to see it realized and bring it to life, I'm so proud of you, and I thank you so much for sharing your platform and your space with me, and for even wanting to interview me. I mean, this is pretty cool, and so I can say you were my first, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.